Kregon's dark world presence. Twisted beliefs, the beginning of Myrtle Grove. Now, let the chants begin. O great Lord Baal, hear our plea. Accept the sacrifice we offer unto thee. Let the blood flow and the screams ring out, as we honor you with this gruesome bout. May the darkness fill our hearts and minds, as we offer up this life to bind our souls to yours in eternal damnation, a pact that brings us your salvation. We pledge ourselves to you, Dark Lord, our loyalty and devotion to you afford. Let the sacrifice appease your wrath, and keep us safe from harm's dark path. We offer up this life as a token, our devotion to you forever unbroken. May the sacrifice be pleasing in your sight, and keep us ever in your demonic might. Hail Baal, the Lord of darkness and might! Accept our sacrifice and bless us this night. Let our devotion be forever true, and keep us always in service to you. And now that we have that out of the way, let's begin the tale of the Goathead and his cult. Chapter 1. Nick. The town of Myrtle Grove was a quiet and unassuming place, nestled deep in the heart of the woods. It was a place where the days stretched on in peaceful monotony, broken only by the occasional rumble of a passing truck or the rustling of leaves in the wind. But beneath the surface, something dark and sinister was stirring. It was the late 1980s, and the town was still reeling from a series of unsolved disappearances that had rocked the community to its core. No one knew who was responsible, but rumors had begun to circulate about a mysterious cult that had taken up residence in the woods. It was on a cool autumn evening that the town first laid eyes on the man who would come to be known as Nick. He walked into town with a cold and strange accent, his eyes flickering with a strange intensity that made the locals uneasy. He wore a long, dark coat that swirled around his legs, and carried with him an aura of danger that seemed to follow him wherever he went. As Nick made his way through the town, he passed by a small church and a bar across the highway called Candy's Bar. The church was a modest affair, with a white steeple and a simple cross atop its roof. The bar, on the other hand, was a noisy and raucous place, filled with the sound of clinking glasses and raucous laughter. The townsfolk were a tight-knit community, but they were also wary of outsiders, especially ones as enigmatic and unsettling as Nick. They watched him warily as he made his way through the town, whispering among themselves about the strange and foreboding feeling that seemed to follow in his wake. Little did they know that Nick's arrival was just the beginning of a dark and terrifying chapter in the town's history, one that would shake them to their core and leave them forever changed. The cult of Baal had arrived, and with it, a wave of horror and gore that would test the limits of their humanity and their faith. Chapter 2. Myrtle Grove. Nick wasted no time in making his presence felt in Myrtle Grove. He bought the old church that had been sitting empty for years, and began retrofitting it with all manner of strange and macabre decorations. The townsfolk watched in horror as the once holy building was transformed into a dark and foreboding shrine to Baal. But despite their fear, they could not deny the power that Nick wielded over the town. His charisma and confidence were unmatched, and his strange accent only added to the air of mystery that surrounded him. As Nick worked on the church, he began to draw the attention of the town's residents, including the mayor's daughter. She frequently saw him as he came and went from her father's office, and found herself drawn to his dark and enigmatic presence. Despite her father's warnings and the protests of the townsfolk, she could not resist Nick's allure. She began to visit him at the church, drawn by the strange and unsettling energy that seemed to emanate from within. As their relationship deepened, the townsfolk grew increasingly uneasy. They could sense that something was amiss, that Nick's influence was spreading like a cancer throughout the town. But they were powerless to stop him, for he had already woven his way into the fabric of their lives, like a dark and inescapable force. And so, as the nights grew longer and the air grew colder, Myrtle Grove found itself caught in the grip of a terror unlike any it had ever known. The cult of Baal had come to town, and with it, a darkness that threatened to consume them all. The affair between Nick and Alicia Plaquemine was a secret that could not be contained. Their illicit passion burned bright, like a flame that refused to be snuffed out. But the mayor, Alicia's father, would not tolerate such transgressions. He forbade the relationship, warning Nick that he would face dire consequences if he continued to see his daughter. But Nick was not one to be easily deterred. He continued to meet with Alicia in secret, even as the tension between him and the mayor grew ever more palpable. It was only a matter of time before things came to a head. One fateful night, the mayor attempted to have Nick arrested for his crimes. But the confrontation turned violent, and in the chaos that ensued, Alicia was shot and killed under the statue of Jesus Christ on a cross where Nick was restoring the podium. The blood from Alicia's body seeped through the floorboards and dripped down into a basement that had previously been unknown. It was a dark and foreboding place, filled with strange and sinister artifacts that hinted at something far more sinister than anyone in Myrtle Grove could have ever imagined. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the mayor of Myrtle Grove took his own life, unable to bear the weight of his guilt and grief. It was a dark and terrible end to a story that had been filled with so much promise. But for Nick, the tragedy was only the beginning. The darkness within him had been unleashed, and he was consumed by a hunger for power and control that he could not resist. The cult of Baal began to take shape around him, drawing in those who were willing to embrace the darkness and leave their humanity behind. Myrtle Grove was forever changed by the events that had transpired. It was a town of darkness and horror, where the past loomed like a specter and the future was uncertain. And at the center of it all stood Nick, the dark and enigmatic figure who had brought the cult of Baal to their doorstep, and who would stop at nothing to see his twisted vision of the world realized. Chapter 3. A clear purpose. It had been 5 years since the tragic events that had forever changed the town of Myrtle Grove. Nick and his closest followers had been biding their time, waiting for the moment when they could strike out and unleash their dark and twisted vision upon the world. That moment had finally come. As the sun set over the town, Nick and his 3 closest followers gathered in the Church of Baal, preparing to perform their grisly rituals in honor of their Dark Lord. They chanted the prayer that Baal had given them, their voices rising in a twisted chorus that echoed through the empty halls of the church. Their purpose was clear: to find the mother of the son of Satan, and to bring her to the altar to conceive. It was a task that they had been chosen for by Baal himself, and they would stop at nothing to see it through to its bloody end. As the night wore on, the rituals grew ever more gruesome and macabre. The air was thick with the scent of blood and decay, and the walls of the church seemed to pulse with an unholy energy that could not be denied. But as they continued their dark work, a sense of unease began to creep over them. It was as though something was watching them, lurking just beyond the shadows, waiting to strike. And then, without warning, it happened. One of their own turned on them, his eyes filled with a madness that was not of this world. He lunged at Nick with a savage fury, but Nick was ready. He drew a knife from his belt and plunged it into the traitor's chest, twisting it with a savage satisfaction as the man's screams echoed through the church. It was a moment of triumph, a sign that the darkness within them was stronger than any outside force could hope to contain. But it was also a warning, a reminder that in the world of the cult of Baal, there was no room for weakness or hesitation. As the night wore on and the rituals continued, Nick and his followers knew that they were getting closer to their goal. The mother of the son of Satan was out there somewhere, and they would find her. They would bring her to the altar, and they would see to it that Baal's will was done, no matter the cost. For in the end, it was the darkness that ruled their lives. It was the darkness that gave them power and purpose, and it was the darkness that would see them through to the bitter end. Chapter 4. Blackwood. Lavinia Blackwood was a woman consumed by darkness. She had grown up in a world of wealth and privilege, but had always felt a pull towards the occult. It was a path that had led her to the cult of Baal, where she had quickly risen through the ranks to become one of the inner circle. Her charismatic personality and persuasive nature made her a valuable asset to the group. She had given herself to Baal on the altar, offering up her body and soul in exchange for power and knowledge beyond anything she could have imagined. And Baal had given her what she desired. He had taken her in his dark red arms, and they had fucked in a frenzy of twisted passion. It was a moment of ecstasy and horror, a union between the mortal and the divine that left Lavinia forever changed. She was the first to join Nick, to embrace his twisted vision of the world and to pledge her loyalty to the cult of Baal. And it was her devotion that had helped to shape the group into the dark and terrifying force that it had become. But as the years wore on, Lavinia began to feel the toll of her commitment. Her body aged rapidly, as though the darkness within her was consuming her from the inside out. She grew weak and frail, but refused to give up her quest for power and knowledge. And then, one fateful night, the son of Satan was born. Lavinia was there, watching in horror and awe as the child emerged from its mother's womb. But as soon as the child drew its first breath, Lavinia's body gave out. She collapsed to the ground, the shell of the woman she had once been, as the darkness within her was finally extinguished. It was a tragic and gruesome end for a woman who had once been so full of life and vitality. But in the end, it was a fitting tribute to the power of the cult of Baal, and to the twisted and horrifying world that they had created. It's a hell of a dark world.